Thanks again, everyone, for joining our employer webinar today. We are going to go over the fall scorecard across all of our employer partners and share some insights from this fall recruiting season. So before we dive into the data, a couple of quick introductions. This is Kristen Ribero. I lead our marketing team here at Handshake, and I'm joined by Molly Johnson.
Hi, everybody. Very nice to meet you. I run the employer product, so both our core free functionality that many of you are using every day, as well as some of our upgraded features. So very excited to share today.
And then one quick note, if you do have questions as we're going through this presentation, again, we're going to be sharing data and insights across different industries that might spark some clarification questions or benchmarking questions. Feel free to use the chat functionality to ask us, and Molly and I will try and get to them throughout the presentation, and then we'll have time at the end to also cover up on any we didn't get to. The other quick note is that this session is being recorded, so if there are any colleagues who were not able to make today's session, worry not. We will send out the recording tomorrow morning, and feel free to listen again or pass that on to your colleagues. Before we dive into our data and insights, I won't stay long on this slide, but I do think it's just important to touch on as we think about what we're sharing with you and sort of the mission that we're on together, both as Handshake and our employer partners, which is really around democratizing opportunity. And we see this sort of gap in opportunity where we believe very strongly that talent is evenly distributed across the United States. So we're really excited to partner with you all in helping close that gap and match the best talent and employers as a key part of that process. And when we think of sort of traditional college recruiting, I think a lot of people on the line might have an idea of, it's not the standard linear path that's described right here, where students just go to a info session or a career fair and then they apply. I think we're all seeing now in today's world, there's a lot more going on in a student's job search or, career journey that maybe we as employers don't see. And that activity is actually not just happening on campus, nor is it just happening in the fall. So there's a lot that students are doing outside of what was considered those, key activities or times of year where they're talking to their friends, they're looking at your branded content online, they might be messaging with you and your recruiting team, asking questions of former interns to understand what it's like to work at your company. And then as you can see here, I mentioned messaging. They're not just opening messages in fall. So you can see there's a pretty steady open rate in terms of students looking at and opening your messages in the beginning of the year, in fall, and even in November, which you would think would be typically a little bit, dead because of the holidays. So that's all to say that, this activity is happening on Handshake, and it's happening in new and different ways all throughout the year. And that puts us in a pretty unique place to actually offer you as employer partners to us meaningful insights, not just on, how are you doing, but how are students actually choosing to engage in their career search activity. So I think, it's good to kind of share what that scale looks like in terms of how we can offer you some unique insights before I pass it over to Molly. Many of you may know that we do have 300,000 employers of all shapes and sizes really using the Handshake platform for college and early talent recruiting. Some of you might see your logos on the screen here. So this is a mix of both free and premium customers of ours. But with that, with that scale of number of employers using our platform, it gives us a great insight into multiple cuts of industry or hiring volume or types of roles being filled on what kind of information we can then aggregate and offer up from what's happening on our platform. On the other side, we talked about how students are engaging. The key tenet here is that we are the system of record for all of our university partners, and so they're passing over that validated data to us, and really encouraging at the Career Center level and at the overall school level their students to sign up for Handshake, activate their profiles, and begin their career search process really early on. And with that partnership with our university partners, we're now over 700 in that list of our network. That leads us to see super high student engagement when it's both endorsed, not just from the companies who are reaching out to these students, but also from the school that they attend and seek guidance from. So that's led us to really the most engaged student audience at scale. And when you look at the actual numbers, it's the largest student career network within the United States. The one stat I'll call out here on this slide is that one on the right, which is the 65% message open rate. So a lot of you probably received an email from us yesterday, actually, which shared the scale of open rate across the industry that you fall into, and Molly will actually share more information on what that looks like for a couple different industries. But I think, this is for those of you who are familiar with using like LinkedIn Recruiter, you can see how much larger this open rate is. And I think it shows that students really do want to hear from you. And there's a story from a recent college grad that I was talking to where she had an employer reach out to her. She's attended an HBCU before graduating. And that sort of connection point where it was an employer who reached out to her, found her background to be, very interesting and a fit for the role, like that goes a super long way. And that's directly contributing to that 65% open rate you can see here. And this is to say, we've kind of gone over these core stats on the left here, but the activity that's not actually visible to you as you're in Handshake today on these student touch points are, when students are updating their profiles, when they're registering for events, getting messages. We're, sitting on top of a gold mine, if you will, of data, which is how we're able to bring some insights to you. Millions of touch points each month, and just a cool stat we just recently ran. This is actually 80 million plus job views already in 2018. So that just articulates, what we're looking at when we talk about the scale of the data that we are able to provide to you all as partners to us. So before we dive into the actual nitty-gritty numbers, hopefully you all received a scorecard last week that talked about a couple different areas, the data, your personalized data in a couple different areas. And before sharing with you what those are, I thought it would be good to just share a little bit about what we heard from you all this summer. So we ran a survey across our employer partners in the summertime and was really asking what were the most important priorities as you look at fall and then going into 2019. And I wanted to call your attention to the first three, the top responses here on the screen, which are building your employer brand, increasing the diversity of your candidate pipeline or increasing representation there, and then improving those results from the on-campus events you're already attending. So it's no shock that as we think about the areas that we shared in that scorecard, getting ahead, they align with those three top areas. So we're looking at schools with job postings, we're looking at employer brand page and job views, and we're looking at number of careers career fairs and events. So from top to bottom, looking at that expanded reach and that increased pipeline representation, which was number 2 on the survey response. Looking at brand awareness and digital engagement with your brand, which was the top answer across the board. And then the third bit there is, really looking at maximizing the results from the time you do spend on campus, because we all know, even though there are new and innovative ways of engaging with students online and digitally, that face-to-face in-person is still very key as we think about connecting with and engaging with our student audience. So those are the 3 areas that we sent out in email and that Molly will dive into first. And with that, I will go ahead and pass it over to her.
Great, and yeah, before we dive in, I haven't seen any questions come in yet, but definitely we hope this is pretty interactive. So if you do have questions throughout the presentation, make sure to write those in, and we'll be pausing throughout to answer any of those. Perfect. All right, so as Kristen mentioned, the first thing we really want to talk through is your school presence and how these different industries are actually engaging with schools across the network. So here you'll see the average number of schools that jobs are posted to across these different industries. So you can see that this is a very substantial number of schools. And when you look at your strategy and what your, how many schools you're typically posting jobs to, or your full team is, these are kind of the averages that you should really be looking to. The other thing to call out is, make sure, if representation is a big key initiative for your team, you're adding those HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutions, women's colleges. We have a super robust presence at all of those different schools on Handshake, and so making sure to actually post your jobs out to a representative student population is very key, not just total volume, but also the types of schools that you're posting to. When you look across all employers, we are seeing 83 average schools posted to. And again, if you refer to that scorecard that you got via email, you can see where you stack up compared to this overall average number. So drilling down, wanted to provide an example of a company that's doing this very well, leveraging our premium offering. They've connected to over 630 universities across the US using Handshake. And when you take a look at their different roles, you can see that they're actually casting a very wide net to make sure students of all backgrounds, all perspectives, all universities are actually able to see those roles and evaluate them. So many of you actually may not be even aware of the new schools that have joined the network since you may have first signed up for Handshake. You can go into your schools tab at any time and go to add schools, and you'll see hundreds and hundreds of universities that you have yet to connect with. So if there's one takeaway from this webinar, we really encourage you to do that. Each semester, we're adding hundreds of universities to the network, and they're very eager to connect with you and for you to connect with their students. Great, so then going into brand, as we saw from that survey, this is the #1 thing that university recruiting teams are focused on. They know that there's hundreds and thousands of companies that are competing for these students' attention, and in order to actually win the best talent, you have to have a really high quality brand that students are very much aware of. Even if you're not a consumer facing company, it's still very important that the student connects with you and understands your unique mission, your culture, what they would learn working there, and why they should care about going to work for you. So looking again across all of these top industries here, you'll see the average employer brand and job page views, and then referring back to that scorecard that you got, you can see how you're stacking up. Great, and then when we take a bird's eye view here and look across, employers as a whole, again, you're seeing over 3,000 employer brand and job views, and then 27 million views across all employers this fall. So just to reiterate, students are highly engaged on Handshake. They're doing their research on Handshake, and they're looking at these company pages. They're looking at all of your jobs, and so taking that extra minute to really keep things updated and to reflect your brand accurately is incredibly important. And we wanted to show an example of how to do this well. So IBM is, again, one of our premium partners. They've really taken the time to polish their company page, include compelling cover photos, alumni stories, videos. Our core employers don't have access to all of this, but you can go into your company page today, make sure your logo is really well optimized and looks good. It appears on every single one of your jobs. Make sure your company description is not only like up to date with what you're doing today, but speaks to the student in a language that they'll understand and really tells them, why your company matters, what's unique about your culture. Students really want to care about the company that they work for, and they really want to picture themselves and see people like them when they're looking at your company page. So taking the time to really go in, you'll see company profile in the left navigation bar, and just edit and tweak that page to make it look really great. By doing this, IBM ran both a virtual strategy and an on-campus strategy, and they were able to really drive home these key metrics that they cared about from a branding perspective, and especially focused on diversity and inclusion. So you'll even notice their company page is very tailored and very personalized to show representation and to speak to students from all backgrounds.
And that's one thing I think, Molly mentioned, students want to see others like them. They want to be able to picture themselves at your company and what their life would be like as an intern or employee of that company. So when we think about diversity and inclusion and actually like personalization, the options that our premium partners have and can do here is putting that perspective forward. You can see that little employee perspective in the bottom right screen, putting that perspective forward on what's going to be most relevant for the student viewing. So not only can students see what is it like for me, what would life be like at IBM per se, but if I was also a, let's say, CS major or looking to get into engineering, I could see what Michael thinks about his time at IBM, and that's really relevant for me versus, someone who's been in a customer success or marketing, let's say, internship. So I think that increasing that personalization is really key when you think about how different students perceive your brand.
And we did have one question come in. We've been referencing the scorecard that you got via email a few times throughout the presentation to refer back to. If you didn't get that, if it's not in your inbox, we'll be following up with an email after this webinar with the recording, and then we're more than happy to provide a scorecard for anyone who did not get one. So don't worry, you can get it if you haven't received it via email for any reason. Great. So then going into the final bucket here, maximizing time at these on-campus events. So you might have heard there's a lot of buzz around our career fairs going away. Does on-campus matter? And what we're seeing with leading employers and talking to our university partners is this is not going away by any means, but going onto campus completely blind, not knowing who you're going to meet with and who you should bring, that's becoming a thing of the past. So when you look at these average career fairs, these average event numbers across these different industries, the trend that we're seeing is these numbers are not going down year over year, but they are going onto campus with much more awareness of who's RSVP'd to these different events, what are the backgrounds of the students I'm going to be meeting with, who's most relevant to actually bring with me to campus based on the students who I plan on meeting with. So maximizing that ROI spent on campus is that big trend that we've been seeing really ramp up in the last 3 years. And so when you look at, again, this trend across all of our core employer partners, they're attending an average of 7 events and career fairs throughout the fall, with over 40,000 of these events and career fairs happening throughout the year, or throughout the fall.
Sorry, our little zero snuck onto the last line there.
Present mode will get you.
It will.
Okay, great. And so this is one example of a company that's doing this extremely well. So as we mentioned, the proactive outreach before you actually set foot on campus is the key here. So for any career fair this company has attended, for any information session, for any coffee chat, resume review, tech talks, anything that's actually happening on campus, they're sending out messages ahead of that fall recruiting season, getting RSVPs of students saying, yes, I plan to attend, I plan to meet with your team, following up with those students even, day before, just to remind them how excited they are to actually meet with them in person. So they're going into campus from the basic logistics of knowing how much food to bring, to the, what engineer should I bring with me, what key business folks need to attend, and making sure also that they're set up to hit key goals. So if representation is very important to your company and you go onto campus really having no idea of the students who are going to come by that career fair booth, you're not really going in with that proactive strategy. So this is one example of, this is again a premium upgraded account where you can actually see these analytics in the product and see the results of all of your campaigns. But you can actually go into the Search Students tab today with your core free account and send up to 100 messages to students, letting them know about an event that you're attending. So 100 messages per semester. So if you still have any events left for this fall, or if you're planning on attending events this spring, we highly recommend you actually go into that Search Students tab, send out a few messages to key students who meet all of your hiring criteria, and collect those RSVPs ahead of time. And if we go to the next slide here, you'll also see today, if you go into your events tab, for any events that you've put into Handshake, you will see an RSVP tab that you can actually see any students who have discovered your event on Handshake and said that they plan on attending. So even without doing that proactive messaging, students can discover your event on their Handshake platform, RSVP to it, and then you can message those RSVPs and engage with those students ahead of the event, which we highly, highly recommend you do to really plan ahead and make sure that you're interacting with those students in a high quality way. Now, the other thing that our premium partners are doing that we're seeing again is, huge trend. I see most partners that we're working with these days actually checking students in digitally with any event that they're hosting so that they can follow up with those students in an intelligent way. So with Handshake, the premium offering, you can check students in with our event check-in tool. They can just put in their email. We have their Handshake profile already, which is great. And then you can run follow-up campaigns to thank them for attending that event, to link them to relevant jobs. Maybe you have an interview the next day that you want to add them to. So really being able to maximize that ROI on campus, both pre and post event, is very, very, very key here. And being able to track metrics throughout. So again, just to kind of recap that, for free today with the core tool, please use the Search Students tab. You saw those open rates. They're incredibly high, so students will be responding to you and excited to get a message. And then if you are excited about launching more at-scale campaigns, checking students in, seeing that data in the product, we'll be talking through that as well in a little bit.
And one thing I'd add here is, I think, sometimes I talk to smaller size companies or employers who think, oh, this isn't for me, or, I don't know if I would use all of this functionality. I think this piece here, that proactive engagement and consistent follow-up with the events you are going to, is very relevant for, small teams or even under resource teams where, there are a couple events that you're going to show up to. Might as well use all of the resources that are at your disposal to show the best results and ROI, like Molly said, from those events that you're spending your time traveling to.
Great. And then we did have a few really great questions come in here. So we got one question around how much in advance do you see students typically register for these events? As often people need to plan for travel up to a month in advance, and any best practices that we have here. So that's a great question. And actually, most of the companies that we do talk to, they're at least having to register for and book travel for key people far in advance. So one thing that we do see is tracking average attendance for specific schools and specific events year over year. So you at least have that like ballpark number. Getting the actual kind of students and their profiles that will be attending that event is good for making sure that you actually know those students when you get to campus. Those are the students you'll talk to maximize time with those students. And then the other thing is if your numbers don't match, so like if you were expecting to meet with 50, you look at your event, there's only 30 registered, and it's a week or two before that event, you can go in to message students to drive that number up. So definitely using like averages from past years to plan more of your overall resourcing and schedule, but then using the weeks leading up to that event for more of that like one-on-one engagement with students and last-minute promotion. That's a really good question. And then we also got a question around overall usage across. So for example, in the example we gave for the Big Four, how many recruiters on average are using this? So we do see companies operate in a few different ways here. We do see some centralized teams where they'll just deploy a team of sourcers, so 3 or 4 people who are responsible for all of that outreach to collect RCPs and applications in a proactive manner. For a company like the one that you saw in the example here, they're deploying more of a distributed strategy. So each recruiter is responsible for their own school, their events, and job applications for that particular university, and they're doing all of that proactive outreach themselves. We actually enable you to pre-schedule these campaigns with Premium, so they're sitting down, a few months before they start travel to really plan out that strategy. So with the example that you saw in the previous slide, that was actually distributed across, I think, almost 40% of their team, sending out campaigns individually. So it depends on the strategy of the company, but that was the case for that one example. Cool. Yep, so just takeaway here is we've said it a few times, but definitely message students. Kristen's example around the student from the HBCU who found her dream job through that proactive message is one of many that we've heard, and we're seeing the same kind of shift that you saw with LinkedIn for professional recruiting, where just relying on students to come to you is no longer enough. So that proactive element does start to matter a lot as we go into the next few years.
Which is a perfect
segue into proactive recruiting and what we're seeing leading employers do on Handshake, on the Handshake platform. So when you look across industry, and you can look and check your inbox and see how you're stacking up here, you're seeing some pretty incredible open rates across all of these core industries. So again, students are highly engaged with these messages. They're opening them mostly actually on their mobile phone, probably not surprising. So if you do message, make sure to actually keep it short and sweet and something that's easy to read on your phone. But very high engagement. They'll get an email of the message as well as an in-app push notification to their mobile phone. Great example here from M&T Bank around shifting to a proactive strategy. Before they started leveraging some of these tools on Handshake, it was very much the classic post and pray. putting out the jobs and career fairs and just hoping that the right students would apply or walk by on campus. And by actually doing this proactive messaging strategy, they saw a massive increase, not only just in overall applications, but in students who met all of their hiring criteria for their positions. And they were able to do this across the school network, so over 100 schools versus just the schools that they were able to visit on campus. And so the way that we highly recommend, if you're interested in this shift to proactive recruiting, maybe you've tested out the messaging for free and you're seeing great results, but you want to do this more at scale, as well as start to understand your core metrics and your branding story. Our talent engagement suite is the way that we're enabling companies like you to do this really effectively at scale. So the core pillars here, driving priority students to those event and job campaigns, as we've been talking about throughout, being able to connect with them meaningfully in person, so maximizing that time on campus, checking students in, following up with them afterwards, as well as deploying a virtual event strategy that's been working very well for our core partners. Highlighting your story, so really being able to paint a picture of what it's like to work at your company, other examples of alumni from that student school, what projects they're working on, why their work matters, really letting the student put themselves in the shoes of your early talent to really picture themselves working at your company, and then building relationships. So, we know that a lot of that kind of initial outreach and proactivity comes at scale, but once students actually engage in your pipeline, you want to do that kind of really high-touch one-on-one to make sure that they pick you and they're a really great mutual fit for both you and for them. So giving you context on the messages that student has gotten, the events they've attended, and the jobs that they've applied for. And then tracking all of this across our analytics suite. So we know that you're only as good as the data that you have in terms of improving your strategy. So showing ROI for everything that you're doing, showing what messaging works really well, tracking results to make sure that year over year your strategy is getting better and better, and you're staying ahead of competition who is also deploying some of these tactics. So want to go through some of the screenshots you saw around the Big Four launching these campaigns, IBM building out that core branding page. Want to show you a kind of a sneak peek into how they're doing this effectively at scale. So our campaign feature allows you to message up to 5,000 students who meet all of that hiring criteria that you have, really promote a specific job or event to make sure that they're either applying or RSVPing. And then, of course, tracking results for all of that outreach that you're doing. On-campus events. So we mentioned going in, making sure you're looking at those RSVPs in the product, checking students in when you actually get to campus so you can reach out to them effectively afterwards, and making sure that you're reaching out to students before and after the event to remind them to come and to thank them for attending. Highlighting your branding story. So Kristen was talking through this, but really being able to showcase different students' perspectives here about what it's like to work at your company, so that students can see, if I attended Jenna's school, I see she's an alumni of my university, my major is similar to hers, I'm going to see her story first. And maybe I recognize her as being in my program and she was a few years ahead of me. So I can really picture myself working there since I know Jenna and I am similar to her in many ways with my school and my major. And then finally, building relationships. So just reiterating this, once a student is interested in your company, actually understanding the different touch points that you've had with Zan is really important so that you're engaging with her with context. Maybe she's already messaged back and forth with a few of your recruiters. She's attended 3 of your events in the past. She knows a lot about you, so you can fast track her. Or maybe she actually hasn't and you want to really educate her on the different areas of your company. So that context is so important to give a high quality candidate experience to every single student that you're engaging with. And finally, results, our favorite. So really being able to see, everything that you're doing and how it's working so you can update your strategy. And just to recap, so all of these things are a part of our premium talent engagement suite. So again, if you're looking to take your current strategy to the next level, these are some of the core pillars that we recommend you talk to us about.
Awesome. And the last little bit, of course, is all in a seamless platform that you already use today. So like Molly said, if you do want to talk to us about the talent engagement suite, it is a very seamless transition as far as, very low implementation and a strong customer success team to support you along the way. One of the ways that our customer success team does support our premium customers is in this analytics and these insights. So we've surfaced over the last, 30 or 40 minutes, we've surfaced insights across schools reached, employer brand and job views, events, number of events and career fairs attended across certain industries. But the fact of the matter is we have that across all industries. And like I said in the beginning, we can pull the data from which on top we sit to actually surface some of what you're seeing here on the screen, which is benchmarking actually against your talent competitors or whom you consider your talent peers. And that's something that our CS team does work with our premium partners on and provides their contacts, and then of course leadership reports on this monthly. So I know Molly mentioned we had a couple questions about, what is this scorecard and why didn't I get it? So like she said, we sent out an email that reviewed your performance specifically last week. So if you didn't receive it, we will definitely send out a recording of this webinar with another snapshot of your specific scorecard. But if you want to reach out to us sooner than that, I encourage you to just email employers@joinhandshake.com. We can not only give you the scorecard that we sent last week, but we can actually have some of our experts here on our side dig into that data that you just saw on the previous screen. So show you benchmarks across how you did in certain majors or in certain schools, your views, number of events attended, all benchmarked across who you consider your talent competitors. And I think this is a really good exercise to go through at this time. Hopefully everyone's, winding down from fall or maybe has those last minute roles to fill. But as you think about going into 2019 and prepping for spring, this type of information is really important and critical, I think, to make the most efficient use of the time, resources, and spend you all have when it comes to university and early talent recruiting.
Yeah, just to reiterate that screenshot that you saw of like all of this benchmarking here, you can actually sit down with one of our, core experts here to go through this exact type of dashboard for your company. So if you do reach out to this email address, we can go through that with you and talk strategies to really, increase some of those core metrics that you care about. So would highly encourage you to reach out if you're interested, and if you found this initial webinar helpful. We did get a few more questions.
Okay, yeah, great. Let's go to questions.
So one great question. So for this type of mass outreach and campaigns, can you populate individual students' names? Answer is yes. This is so important. We really think that, even if it is a mass approach, you take that kind of personal lens towards your outreach. So you can insert variables for the student's name, for their school, and for their major to really give it that personal touch, even if it is kind of that scaled outreach approach. And then another question around this. So the 100 messaging limit, it's by semester. So 100 messages per fall recruiting season and per spring recruiting season. And it is by company. So you'll get 100 messages across your team. So this is really helpful just to get a sense of kind of the ROI of reaching out and for smaller programs. But then really to do that at scale, we do recommend upgrading to get more messaging and to do this with campaigns. And then we got a question around how companies prioritize who they're meeting with at these on-campus events. So what I would recommend, and you can do this actually right now for free, is if you go into your any events that you're attending, if you go into your events tab and check out one of those events, like an information session that your company is attending, going to that RSVP tab, you can look through student profiles. So we literally link to the student Handshake profile on that tab, and picking out students who meet, core hiring criteria. You can export their resumes to a hiring manager even before that event, and then sending them a message saying that you're specifically very excited to meet with them. We even see some companies that are booking like a 5-minute window with that student to actually make sure that they're 100% going to connect with them one-on-one. So they'll like even schedule, I've seen like a post-career fair coffee chat where they schedule it with 10 really high potential students. So again, just taking the time ahead to look through those RSVPs or to invite more students to come to that event. So someone asked around kind of our ultimate goal around schools on Handshake. We would absolutely love for every single university in the U.S. and internationally to become a part of the Handshake network. We want to help every single student of all backgrounds, of all college affiliation, community colleges, basically any student who needs career help, which is most that we've seen get a job. So we're actively exploring partnerships with every single university that we can to bring them on as a Handshake partner. All right, so it looks like that's it as far as questions. If there are any that you still have on your mind but don't want or haven't been able to send in, feel free, again, employers@joinhandshake.com, just send us an email. And like Molly said, we would be happy to have our experts here review your analytics report, your specific company's analytics report, and benchmark you against some of your peers from this fall or any time frame you see fit. So please do reach out, and thank you so much for spending the time with us this morning. Thank you.